All right, folks, let's kick off day 2 of Write the Docs Australia 2025 by welcoming Gerry Gaffney to the stage. Gerry is going to offer a view of AI and, in particular, its place in user research and user experience design. He will also discuss whether AI will be our faithful assistant or an engine of our professional demise. Gerry tells me that he plays guitar often, however, suggests that he could always do with a little bit more practice. And if you're into user experience, you might have actually heard of Gerry before as the person who ran the UX Pod podcast between 2016 and 2023. Now, Gerry is originally from Ireland, but for the past couple of years, he has been holidaying in Greece when the southern winters rage down here. Sounds like a pretty nice sea change. But for now, let's welcome Gerry Gaffney and get a view from the sidelines.
Thanks, Jared. And as Jay started off yesterday, he said, "Hello, fellow nerds," which I thought was a really nice greeting. The other thing is, if you're queuing up if you're lining up for the photo, you don't have to do it by height. You can do it alphabetically or by date of birth instead, because I don't think we should focus on just one single IA. I call this talk a view from the sidelines because a couple of months ago when I was chatting to Swapnil, about stuff in general, I was saying I no longer is a tech writer, so you probably don't want me to get up and talk. And he said, no, maybe you can do something, from the sidelines. So hence the name, A View from the Sidelines. I chose a picture of a train. The original picture I had as my opening slide was, in fact, HAL from 2001: A Space Odyssey, because when I think about dystopian futures with AI taking over and making life miserable for everyone, that's the scene I think of where Dave is outside of the spaceship and he's trying to get back in and he says, "Open the pod bay door, HAL." And Hal says, "I'm sorry, Dave, I'm afraid I can't do that." And it's a very, very dark moment in sci-fi cinema. In fact, quite an amazing movie when you look at it now. It's really boring because it's made, I don't know how many years ago. But it's got these amazing zero-gravity scenes in it done before CGI, and it's just an amazing piece of work. Anyway, that's a complete sidetrack. I want to take one extreme view of AI and its use in technical documentation. And this is a quote from Tom Johnson, who runs the I'd Rather Be Writing blog. And I imagine that several of you people would know of that. And he said, I'll quote it word by word, "I find the non-use of AI by tech writers baffling. I've almost stopped writing docs myself, allowing AI to write for me, for technical documentation at least." And that was really, I guess that surprised me quite a bit. And it really is an extreme view. To take another view, I think, of where we're at with AI at the moment, and I know I heard this from a lot of people yesterday, is the hype cycle. This is Gartner's hype cycle, very unscientific curve, but I like it a lot. Nowadays, Gartner have got about another 24 little labels in the various parts of the curve here, but it starts off with technology trigger down the bottom left, then goes up to the peak of inflated expectations. Then it goes down into the trough of disillusionment, which I absolutely love as a title, the trough of disillusionment or the slough of despair or something. And then it goes up the slope of enlightenment and into a plateau of productivity. It's very, very much a consultancy slide, I would think, and the sort of thing that you would sell to companies and run 3-day courses or 5-day courses around how to position your organization, and then they'll have a life cycle for this life cycle curve that will enable them to improve it as years go on and add more dips and so on, and sell more training and consultancy time. I'm sure they're great, but anyway. But when you think about where we are now, I think a lot of people are at the peak of inflated expectations. Got a quote or two later on that we'll look at, but if you look at something like the evaluation of NVIDIA, who are making these GPU units that are being used by the AIs, I mean, I don't know what its valuation is at the moment, but surely it has to be approaching some sort of bubble. I'm not a financial advisor, and your circumstances may vary, but if I had a lot of money in NVIDIA, I think I'd be slightly concerned at this point that maybe I should balance it off with, I don't know, horse and cart stuff or something more basic. So this is where we are, maybe at the peak of inflated expectation, or perhaps down here, the trough of disillusionment. I think that's where Lana is at the moment, the trough of disillusionment. She put a lot of effort in, a lot of time, and she's ended up down here. Or maybe she's on the way back up. Maybe there is no slope of enlightenment. Or maybe as I was looking at this curve, I thought, perhaps this is as good as it gets, the trough of disillusionment. We end up down at the bottom, and it never gets any better. For me, I guess I got interested in the whole AI thing. Well, I've been interested in technology for a long time, and technology within tech writing originally, within tech support roles, and then within user experience. Probably the only thing that's really changed in my life in regards to AI is the way that I don't Google as much as I used to. So in the old days, if I wanted to find out something, I'd Google it and get a bunch of answers, most of which were irrelevant bullshit, but the odd one would be in there. You'd be able to find what it was that you wanted. But now I'm a little bit more inclined to use AI to answer specific questions about how to do tasks. For example, I needed to change the hinge on my oven door. And instead of Googling it and going through all the videos that were there, some of which would be amateur, some of which would be professional, some of which would be completely wrong, I used the AI to go and get me the most appropriate video and the most appropriate steps. And I found that works really well. I've got a simple example here from Sonos. I don't know if anyone uses the music system Sonos. It's the wireless Wi-Fi system. I've got version 1. It's very old because I'm too cheap to replace my speakers, because there's nothing wrong with the old ones. But when I try and do anything a little bit geeky in there, I end up going around the loop of the help within Sonos. And the old saying about help, of course, is that it doesn't. And I find that with Sonos quite often, that their help doesn't. But when I went to Perplexity on my phone and gave it the question of how do I disable the line-in feature on one of my speakers, it came up with this step-by-step guide, which is precisely correct. And I followed this guide and I found out what it was that I needed to do. And I find that quite amazing. Another example that I had recently was I was looking for the morning timetable for the Westgate Punt, so as I could take my bicycle across the river between Spotswood and Fisherman's Bend. And when I went to Google, I know I shouldn't be using my phone while I'm on the bicycle, but anyway, I went to Google and it just came up with a link to the homepage of the Westgate Punt. Now I know that in there somewhere it will have the timetable. I don't know whether it'll be on the homepage or whether I'll have to negotiate through the site to find exactly what I want. When I put the same query into Perplexity, it comes up, the very first thing it's got is a screen grab of the timetable for the morning peak. And I think that's really, really quite impressive. It particularly impressed me because there's in fact no semantic data contained within the timetable itself. It's just a PNG or an SFG or something. Now I don't know whether that was pure chance that it picked up the fact that it said timetable somewhere in the alt text perhaps, but the fact that it was able to go and query the information on the website, parse it, and come back to me with exactly what I want. And underneath it was a list of the times in text as well. So this idea of having AI help me to get an answer to the task that I'm actually trying to carry out, for me is quite a spectacular change. And for me, it also explains, or helps to explain, why people like Google are so worried about being on this bandwagon, because suddenly they can't service up the sort of advertising-heavy content that we've gotten, unfortunately, so used to over the last few years. When ChatGPT came out, and this is just 2 years ago, I think 2 years ago last month, if I'm correct, anyway, around 2 years ago, I'll slow down. I have to talk a bit more slowly, people keep telling me. What aspects of UX and UI would be best suited to artificial intelligence? And I had a list of a few things. One, and this was, sort of personal concern, or, I think fear. What was the thing? Fear and curiosity were the two things that Alana mentioned yesterday. This was a little bit of fear, getting concerned about what was coming down the track in terms of getting replaced by the machines. And I thought AI would be suitable for anything that had a design system. I mean, we've seen the commodification or commoditization, or whatever the term is, of design work in the UI space and in the UX space over many years. As there's been downward pressure on labor costs, companies tending to hire more junior designers into these spaces, and using design systems, which from an economic point of view makes an awful lot of sense, to have a design system that specifies what colors to use, how you manage your accessibility, how you manage your navigation, how you manage your branding, what you call the screens, all of the stuff that's to do with the sort of space that tech communicators are very familiar with, making sure that people are working to a standard and not standing around the corner arguing about whether to use an apostrophe in a particular location or not, or tabs versus spaces, as Jared said earlier on. So that was, it was clear that if you're working in that space, AI was going to be able to move in there, and I'll show you an example of that in a moment. AI would also be good for quantitative data analysis if you're doing surveys and the like. It would also be useful for thematic analysis in qualitative data. So what I find very impressive is if I do a bunch of interviews and I get the transcripts, which again I use the AI to produce, I can put that transcript into the AI, and it will come back and tell me these are the themes that are emerging from those interviews. And it's pretty impressive. I'll show you a little bit of example of that in a moment. Competitive analysis, where if you're working on a particular application or website, you can go to an AI and say, go to all these other websites or applications, tell me what sort of navigation they use, tell me what sort of features and functions they have, and tell me what I can learn for the application that I'm working on. So that sort of competitive or best practice analysis is clearly suited to using an AI. Administering unmoderated usability testing, where you have a set of tasks you're going to give them to individual users, probably remotely using Zoom or the like. You can use AI to do that sort of work. You don't need a human in the loop of actually conducting that sort of usability test. And then the one that surprised me a little bit was conducting user research interviews. I spent a lot of time over the years out, typically on site with people in their homes or their place of work, questioning them about what they do, what their values are, how they carry out particular tasks, how well things work for them, what sort of things they need that they're not currently getting. And I was really surprised to see user research interviews being done quite well by AI. I'll show you an example in a moment. I think conceptual design AI is not there yet, probably not too worried about that. And hands-on activities like design workshops probably sit best with human facilitators at the moment. I'm going to play this video. It's blurry, it doesn't matter. It's about a tool called Wizard creating from scratch a little multi-screen app. I have to hold my microphone to the computer for technical reasons.
This is Wizard, that's UIZARD.io. And this tool recently released an AI feature where you can give it a prompt and it generates an editable UI design. So to use this new feature, we need to select mobile for a mobile app. I'm going to do a music app, so I'll give it a description for that. And then we need to describe the style, so I'm going to go with modern minimalistic. And then we have some tags we can choose from, so we'll go with light theme and then modern as well, and then hit generate my project. And then just a matter of seconds, all of the app screens will start to generate for this app project. I'm going to select Auto Designer here at the bottom center, and then go to Generate Theme. I can then give the AI another prompt to update the theme. This time I just want a purple color instead of this pinkish red, and I'll just generate that. I'm then going to select the music player screen and go to Export, and I'm going to export this as an SVG, so I can...
Okay, could people hear that okay? Yeah, okay, great. Technology, gotta love it. This is, you know, obviously you're not going to get out of that a perfectly finished, perfectly polished user interface, but Jesus, that's pretty impressive. You know, the chap types in an app for people who love music, and that's all he's told it initially, and it's come up with all of these screens. Now, obviously, you're going to have to take that, rework it, test it, do all those other things, but you know, if I were running a company that was producing apps based on, say, fixed price quotes to my clients, I'd be jumping into the likes of this and using it for sure, no doubt about it. And there are lots and lots of apps out there that do this sort of work. By the way, I do have 2 slides at the end with links to all of this stuff, so I've got a bunch of references, so you don't need to worry about where that comes from. I'm going to show you one more video, the last video that I'm going to show you. And this is a user research interview being conducted by an agent. So you'll see a person speaking in the video, that is a human, and the other person speaking is in fact an AI agent who's conducting the interview. And this is from a webinar conducted by a company called Askable, which is an Australian company that do user research and marketing recruitment. So this goes for just about a minute or so.
Great. Could you tell me about the last time you ordered food using a delivery app? What did you order and why did you choose that particular meal?
We ordered curry because the kids were away and my husband and I wanted to have a treat, just the 2 of us.
That sounds like a nice way to enjoy the evening. How was your experience using the app to find and order the curry? Was it easy to navigate and find what you were looking for?
Yes, it was actually very easy. We've used it before, so we knew what we were doing, but we were able to find what we wanted to order.
That's good to hear. When you were choosing the curry, were there any specific features in the app that helped you make your decision, like reviews or pictures of the food?
Yes, we looked at the reviews of the...
Okay, so that's a little snippet of a relatively naturalistic conversation. I mean, the AI agent was a bit smarmy, a bit ingratiating, but it's an AI. You know, you got to cut it some slack. If I were sort of putting on my which I was putting on my professional hat and saying, is that a good user researcher? I'd have to say, not really. Mid-level researcher maybe, because it asked a number, or she or it asked a number of leading questions, and also had multiple questions in one question. And those sorts of things, I would say that makes it less than optimal as an interviewer. However, I'd say exactly the same thing about the majority of user researchers that I've worked with if they're not doing user research full-time in a professional capacity. So I can't remember the phrase that Lana used yesterday, but it was like, you know, pretty good but not great, or not great but pretty good, or something. Like it was okay. And the work that it did, and those transcripts are magic. I used to use humans to do my transcripts for years, and having them done in real time online is absolutely incredible. And then having an AI do your thematic analysis. So this sort of area is just wide open for AIs to move in and help UX people to do their work. Now, Askable, the company who that came from, made a few statements in that webinar that I thought were worth mentioning. They say, first of all, that there's less researcher bias. I would very much doubt that. I think, in fact, they've got a lot of bias built in because of the way they've designed that agent. Nevertheless, if you did design an agent that had less of that bias, or that had, in fact, any particular set of characteristics, you can tweak those characteristics according to need. They say that participant feedback is more honest. Now, that's not entirely surprising, because we've known for years that people tend to be more honest when they're interacting with a machine than when they're interacting with a human. And if we go back to psychological experiments like ELIZA, you know, the green screen psychological stuff from the 60s or whenever it was, there's a lot of data that supports that assertion. They say that participants were less inclined to edit their responses to appear better, because they know they're interacting with an AI. They don't have to sort of impress it in the same way as they would want to impress a person that they're interacting with. And they also said, which initially surprised me, that people are more likely to participate when the interviews are being run by an AI rather than a person. So if they invite people to attend an interview and they say the person interviewing is actually going to be an AI, they get a higher response rate. That might be the case because people have that reluctance to talk to a real human, or it might be a novelty factor, I don't know. So I take that all of those things with a grain of salt, but it certainly is interesting that and they've got a particular line to push as well, but that's interesting to see them making these assertions. By the way, the image on the right, how many people have seen that lady on the right? A lot of people. Yeah, if you haven't seen it, it's worth going and checking out. Again, the link is in the back. The UK carrier O2 have got this agent whose job is to waste the time of spammers. So she answers the calls and she chatters away to them and wastes their time and tries to keep them from attacking real humans. You could say it's both ageist and sexist, but they say that it's that's a typical user who's being targeted by scammers and so on. I don't know if they've got other personas as well, but worth a look, quite impressive. ChatGPT can write a pretty good report. I've used ChatGPT not to write reports that I've then given to clients, but of course not. But I have it as a helper to write reports. And if I look at the introduction to this report, it was from a bunch of 9 transcripts for half-hour, 45-minute interviews that I'd done, and I gave it all the data. I said, transcribe this, write me a report, give me a thematic analysis. And it came up with this introduction saying the interview transcripts of 9 participants reveal varied expectations and perceptions, blah, blah, blah. Most people discovered the product through social media platforms, and it mentioned TikTok and whatever platforms they had discovered it by. The report also says trust and credibility emerged as significant concerns, and that participants wanted to see this organization hooking up with reputable banks to support the development of trust. And then it talked about budgeting and financial tools and how they were crucial in users' lives and saving strategies. I didn't take that as it was because I had other stuff that I needed to put in the report, but I could have taken that. And if I were the client eliminating the middle person, me, I could take that report and think, that's actually pretty good and it's coming up with actionable stuff. On the other hand, it did offer authoritative sounding recommendations that were unsupported by the data set. So this is the so-called hallucinations, which as we know are not hallucinations, they're just bullshit. I mean, it's just coming up with stuff that, because of the database it's coming up with assertions that are coming from the domain or from somewhere else or from whatever. It said, as the second part of that paragraph, consider offering live chat support for real-time assistance. So great. Where did that come from? I have no idea. It did not come from the data set. So you really have to watch out for this sort of stuff if you're working with AI. And to come back to a point Landa mentioned yesterday, she's talking about would I hire and AI as a junior tech writer, and she said not have had to give it any money, basically. Nielsen Norman Group have spoken on a few of their things. There's a person called Kate Moran who writes some of their stuff, that you could treat AI as an intern, which I think gelled quite nicely with that concept. And they say, work with AI tools in UX in the way you'd work with an intern. Treat their work as a first pass, double check their facts, and provide specific instructions. Which I think is a very solid set of advice for people using AI in general at the moment, particularly LLMs, which are based on a whole, on everything, meaning that there's a lot of rubbish in there that you have to filter out. Just looking at the time, I'm fine. Another thing I wanted to talk about, moving away from UX, is environmental cost or externalities. The economists like the term externalities. So when you drive or fly, you're not paying for the actual cost to the world of flying or driving, right? They're all externalities. They're borne by future generations, basically. So externalities are costs that are not being borne at the time of use by the people actually using the product. And there's a couple of quotes here I think it's worth delving into a little bit. The first one is, Microsoft, Google, and Amazon have recently struck deals with operators and developers of nuclear power plants to fuel the boom in data centers. That's quite a telling requirement, isn't it, that these companies are so dependent on energy usage, and energy usage is going up so fast that we have to do that. Perplexity, the AI that I tend to use most, told me that each ChatGPT query is estimated to use 50 to 90 times more energy than a Google search. We've gotten used over the years to considering online stuff as if it was somehow magically green, and it's only in recent years that people have begun to say, well, hang on a minute, that's not necessarily the case. I remember working on print magazines and people putting them online and saying we're putting them online in order to save the trees, which was clearly an unsupported assertion at any time, but it's becoming, as our usage of more sophisticated, or at least more energy-intensive tools go up, then the environmental costs go up enormously as well. And then we've got the demand on water. The quote on the right is about companies like Microsoft, Google, and Meta promising to replace the environmental water that they're using in these data centers, even though they've got no actual proven way to do this. So we've got a huge environmental cost to the use of AI that we really need to be conscious about. It's so easy to just use all of these tools as if there were no, as if we weren't throwing stuff away the whole time, as if we weren't burning fossil fuels or whatever it happens to be. I don't want to depress everyone. Incidentally, in 2023, 21% of all the electricity used in Ireland was used in data centers, and that's growing very, very fast. So we've got a huge demand on the grid from data centers, much of which is now and increasingly consumed by AIs. And there's also a lot of unwarranted optimism. There's a guy called Patrick Neiman who wrote a book on AI in UX. And he said there will be less hallucinations. I'm sure most tech writers in the room would be going, that should be fewer hallucinations. Surely. There will be less hallucinations. But besides that, bias will be limited and new hardware will reduce power consumption. Well, we know that those assertions are unsupported. Reducing power consumption in one engine, like the steam engine, just meant that more steam engines would be built to use more power, called the Jevons paradox. Job displacement, I was talking to Gemini, chatting to Gemini, and I said, it sounds a little coy when you use the term job displacement. And Gemini said, you're absolutely right, being ingratiating as these AIs tend to be. The term job displacement can sometimes understate the severity of the impact AI will have on the job market. I don't know how many people here are going to lose their job because of AI, hopefully none. But we do know that when something is good enough, not as good perhaps as the previous human. When something is good enough, then people will tend to use that. The analogy I often think of is desktop publishing way back in the day. When desktop publishing systems like PageMaker, which nobody here probably remembers, came out, you couldn't do things like kerning, and you couldn't do widow and orphan control, and all of these fancy things that your typesetters would do. But you know what? It didn't actually matter. Those typesetters would look at what you were doing and say it looks like shit. But for most people, it looked good enough for what they wanted to achieve. So good enough is good enough for a lot of people. There's a lot, of course, of philosophical, moral, and ethical implications associated with the use of AI. There's a quote here: "Are we amplifying our cognitive potential or outsourcing it entirely?" I find this one really interesting. I'm in the habit of trying to do drafts of things. So if I'm working on some sort of UI design, not that I do much of that nowadays, but I would draw 7 or 8 different versions of a user interface to try and see what was working and what was not working. I talk to other people, do all the sorts of stuff that as humans we do to interact and to explore the design space. Now I can just go to an AI and say, do this. I can come up with a result, and without really interacting with the, if you like, the intellectual or the cognitive challenge, I can take that output and run with it. So it does have an impact on the way we operate and the way we think, in the same way as using navigation systems on our phone reduce our ability to effectively navigate in the world at large. Our plastic brains are quite happy to hand off tasks to external tools. I mean, we've done that since forever, since we picked up things and started to hit other things with them. Our brain changes so we don't have to do the same things as we used to. A telling quote at the bottom there is from a recent New Scientist. Ukraine is using drones equipped with artificial intelligence that can identify and attack targets without any human control in the first battlefield use of autonomous weapons or killer robots. And there's a local company called AI Athena, or Athena AI, which helps develop these systems that are being used by Russia, UK, Israel, Ukraine, lots and lots of countries. I don't want to single out any particular one, but handing off our warfare to autonomous systems. I know it sounds very, very sci-fi, but we are currently doing those sorts of things. So the implications out there are quite astonishing. I've called this slide 90% of everything, and that's a nod to, you might sort of note I've got a bit of a sci-fi bent. Sturgeon's Law, there's a guy called Theodore Sturgeon, who, when he was commenting on the fact that somebody said that 90% of science fiction is crap, said that 90% of everything is crap, which I think is very true, and I think 90% of AI is crap, and it wouldn't surprise anyone, I'm sure, to hear that assertion. There's a quote there from a recent article in The Age, quoting Mark Benioff from the CEO of Salesforce, really casting some shade on Copilot, Microsoft's AI. I don't know how many people here use Copilot, but he said that, I really think that Copilot is the next Clippy. How many people remember Clippy? Oh, wow, okay, cool. Clippy was this little thing, this little paperclip that you'd be writing a document in Word, and it would come up and would tap on the screen, and it would say, hey, it looks like you're writing a letter or whatever, can I help you? And it was the first time you saw it, you thought, wow, that's cute. And a second time, you think, wow, that's annoying. And then they eventually killed it. And it could be a dog instead of a paperclip. It had all sorts of different avatars, and yeah, it was awful. And look, Copilot, I must admit, I've had a little play with Copilot. I've yet to have it do something useful for me, but I'm sure I haven't been using it very effectively. But, it's one of those things. In fact, I use it to coach me through walking through this presentation, and it kept beeping at me saying, slow down, stop reading from the slide. It's driving me crazy. So anyway, Copilot, I'm not a huge fan of at the moment. And there's another term there, slop. At least in the fast-moving world of online message board, is a broad term that has developed some traction in reference to shoddy or unwanted AI contact. Anyone who's on LinkedIn or the social media apps will see that there's an awful lot of slop being produced. People, automating their newsletter productions to have an AI produce it. And when you think AIs are being trained on all the content that's out there, and a lot of what the work they're doing is producing more and more lower and lower quality content that can train them in the future, which is, I guess, why Lana was saying that LLMs have, you didn't say peaked, but you talked about had reached a pinnacle of their development, which is probably quite right. Will tech comms embrace AI? It's hard for me to imagine the technical communication community not embracing AI. I remember when swapping the EH and HE and the letter on the word "the" was a major technological breakthrough. It was so handy. Grammar and spell checking, macros and writing macros, and the same issue of sunk cost. Do I write a macro to do this, or do I do the whole thing manually 5 times, and where's the break-even point? Reusability, single source approaches, markup languages, templates, they're all in the same continuum, I think. Now, prediction is hard, especially about the future, is a well-known expression attributed to various people. History does suggest that we will look at today's AIs as being primitive. Individual AI technologies and companies will come and go. LLM may well be at the end of its development cycle, but there are other AI technologies out there. Given that there's a clear demand for some of the services that AI provides across multiple industries, from healthcare to manufacturing, one can imagine AI in the future being a core technology. And if quantum AI ever really comes, it could be revolutionary. I wouldn't keep my fingers crossed for that, mind you. So I think what people can do in the tech community, and what I want to do in my own life, is sort of keep across what's happening, be mindful of the environmental costs of AI when we're specifying or purchasing AI services, and consider what a future without our traditional view of work might mean, because I think the work landscape is going to change significantly, not just for tech writers, but across the board. Another way, though, I guess on an upside of all this, I had a steam train at the start. This is a maglev train in Shanghai. It's just more stuff, you know? I always think that when some new technology comes along, like mobile phones or something, oh my God, I've got to work into this new space. It is just more stuff, and the tech writing community is resilient and used to changing. So I think it will deal with AI in the same way as it's dealt with everything else that's come down the track so far. Here's some references, reading rabbit holes to run down, 2 pages of it. So good stuff in there. There's reference to all the stuff that I mentioned and some additional material as well. And I asked ChatGPT, I said, I'd like an image for a thank you slide at the end of a presentation on the impacts of AI and technical communication. You can choose the best format. And that's what it came up with. So I don't think we need to worry too much. Just quite yet. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Gerry, for that pretty interesting overview of all the things that may or may not be with AI. And I really hope that some of this content might have actually inspired you a little bit to think about some of the things that you can talk about later on in Trenches. So let's start with some questions. We'll roving mic it again. If there's questions up the back, we can't get the mic up to you up there. So if you do have questions, just come down to the top of the stairs there, and we'll make sure you get your question answered there. So first of all, we'll start in the front row.
Sorry, I always have questions. With the advancements in AI and the usage of energy and all this sort of stuff, in addition to like training models using all of the information out there, I feel like there's a limit to how much energy we can do as well. And I think you covered that very well. Do you see that as like a significant limitation of like capping us at the top of that like usability sort of curve as well? Or do you think that we can continue to pull resources away from the rest of the population of Ireland and shove that into data centers? Or how do you see that sort of advancing? Because I think you have a good long-term view of these things and how this technology can be adopted.
Look, I don't have a solution for that, and it's a huge concern. I mean, it's far more fundamental than AI or any of those particular things. Are we going to be here as a society in 20 years' time? And we really are pushing the boundary of everything. I don't want to sound negative. I mean, there are very positive things. We have the ability to fix things, and we have, I guess, thinking systems like donut economics and changes to the way that we interact with our planet and our resources. But if we don't grasp that, AI is just one of the many things that's going to beat us into oblivion. I mean, I'm hopeful that sounds terrible, doesn't it? I'm hoping that that won't happen. But we have to address these fundamental issues, and we have to do it at governmental level. We as individuals up against essentially the fossil fuel industry are not going to solve these problems. It has to be done at a bigger scale. But even so, even if we had entirely green electricity, I mean, the AI, one view of AI is that it's actually competing with humans now for energy. Philip K. Dick has got a great story about 2 factories that are consuming the last resources on the planet in order to make, I don't know, staplers or something. And, I mean, that's kind of the bleak future that you can end up with if we don't manage it. And, we didn't talk about controlling AI and, legislating what AI is used for. But I think, I don't know, look, to be honest, I just don't have an answer to your question. That was a very long answer. I'm sorry about that.
All right, now we're going to go up the back. We've got some folks who have made their way the long way down from the back tiers. So we'll go and grab some questions from there.
Thank you. I'm just thinking, like, the patience I have for like an intern or a junior is based on the fact that they're a person and that it's my job to help them grow in their career. So I find it very hard to think of voluntarily bringing one into my world that I have to babysit that isn't going to learn. And I don't know, I just... yeah, exactly. So it's like, I'm finding it hard to see why other people might enjoy that. And I think I'm also thinking about how a lot of the other tools that have been previously adopted are quite, predictable, or, it's a very much a given input gives a given output, rather than sort of this probabilistic AI stuff where what comes out changes.
Well, I guess there's two things there. I mean, one is treating, the interns, and I guess philosophically, not bringing in interns, real human interns, and training them up is a bad thing. It's been happening throughout, certainly the design industry, for many years now, that people are not taking in interns to the same extent. They're just not doing it. It's almost like an abdication of responsibility. You do have some of the bigger organizations that can afford to do it, and you've got people like, for example, I don't want to pick particular names, but Telstra, for example, take on juniors and help train them up, and that's admirable. However, commercial processes and commercial pressure will force or not encourage a lot of companies to drop that and just pick the cheapest labor. I mean, that's what capitalism is all about. Follow the cheapest labor and exploit it to the maximum possible extent. I'm not advocating for that, but that's where we are. I'm sorry, the other part was about not knowing what output you're going to get. I mean, that's the joy of AI. You've got no idea what it's going to come up with. Sorry, was that a question that you had about that?
I guess it's more about that distinguishes it from other tools that have been previously adopted.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is qualitatively and quantitatively different from everything else that we've had, because it was, do this and this will happen, do that and that will happen, and now let's do this and God knows what will happen.
Yeah. And I think not to capitalize, monopolize the mic, but in the first part, there will be pressure to, or will be asked to use these tools by companies, but it's sort of like from a personal level, it's like, well, I'm now have an intern in my editor that isn't going to learn and isn't someone with a career.
Well, it might learn, but it won't benefit you.
There's another question at the back there. In fact, two. We've got time for maybe two more.
Yeah, sure. So we've heard a lot about the limits AI is hitting, both in terms of input data and in terms of power consumption and water use. But to quote the old saying, things will continue until they can't and then they stop. In fact, what I suspect we'll see is things moving in a different axis, which is to say smaller LLMs that run locally, that run on your desktop, in your phone, and still achieve something useful, and in fact increasing the capability of what you can do within those resource constraints. So I think that's the direction we'll go in, because we clearly can't go in the other direction. Yeah. So I don't think we should assume that the development of AI has come to a stop. I think it'll just develop along a different axis. And so that then raises the question, how does that impact our work? I very much remember the introduction of desktop publishing. I actually was running a publishing company in the 1980s. I actually think that we need to look at how that's going to impact this field in terms of what happens when we're being replaced not so much by data centers, but by everybody just having a handy app on their phone that does 80% of what you want. So I think that's perhaps an area that we can think about next.
Yeah, thanks. I agree with that. Yeah. Although I will point out that running LLMs on your machine locally currently is hugely intensive. But yeah.
But it will be less so as the hardware optimizes for that.
Yeah.
Over to you.
My question was, can you use AI to iterate some of the problems that it has, almost like using it against itself? But and the other thing is, are you working towards, I mean, it's a little bit preaching to the converted here, getting this message out to the people who are telling us, oh, you have to use AI, it's so great, is really important. So hoping that we can support you in that endeavour as well.
Well, look, for me, as a view from the sidelines, I'm not in the game, so it doesn't, I've literally got no skin in the game. In regards to using AI to improve itself, I mean, at the very low level, when you're writing prompts, you get it to do something. If it's wrong, you go and modify the prompt to get it to improve. But whether you can get it to improve its own ecosystem, which would be the real challenge, I don't know what the answer to that is. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, we've got maybe time for one quick question. I'm going to go with in the front row there. Well, second from the front.
It's really quite far up the front. I'm very brave for sitting in the third row. What's the point of being mindful about our energy usage when we're just going to do it? It feels to me like a SOP. And if it's, I'm with you, it's going to go until it goes and then things will go sideways. Will we be having this conversation in 20 years because we might not be able to? I feel like this is a statement, not a question. Being mindful makes you feel good and it makes your behaviour continue to be crap. So it's easy to do that anyway.
I agree entirely. Be mindful is a very bad choice of words. No, it was. Really what I'm hoping is that when people are involved in specifying an AI to use within their organisation, that one of the selection criteria, to use a horrible boring term, will be, what is the environmental impact? How much does it cost? What's the carbon footprint? What mitigation do you take? How much water does it use? Those sorts of levels. At an individual level, as usual, individual actions don't really aren't that impactful unless they're carried out by millions and millions of people. But yeah, I agree.
Okay, folks, well, that is right up to the full time for question and answers. Thanks very much for everyone participating in that one. And again, inspiration, right? Let's have a think about the things we might talk about with horror stories, with AI, because I'm sure there's plenty. Folks, let's thank Gerry once again.
Thank you.